I think we're live. Nick, thank you so much for
Morning.
being on here now. Yeah, exactly. Morning. Just before the stream, we were complaining about how hot it was, and the fact that we just couldn't get to sleep. It's been quite manic. How have you found the lockdown? You've exited your company. You mentioned before the stream you're a little bit more chilled out now. How has the lockdown affected you?
I think I've been very lucky with the lockdown. I exited in January this year from a hospitality company. So, if I would have still been working now, it would have been absolute torture. So I think, in terms of exit, couldn't have been any better. So I sort of
Yeah,
headed into the lockdown in quite a good headspace.
yeah.
So, I'm extremely fortunate for many things. So it was great to actually just take some time out, chill out a bit, have no pressures of meetings and social pressures, and actually just have like a forced incubation, which I needed. So it's actually, not too bad timing for me, actually.
Yeah, yeah. For people that haven't heard of you, could you kind of highlight your story and kind of what led you to be where you're at right now? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So top line, I used to work at L'Oreal. So I did 5 years marketing straight out of university there, did work my way up through the ranks there, really enjoyed it. Then set up DesignMyNight in 2010. We were working on the idea in 2009. It went live in 2010. Went on a 10-year journey with DesignMyNight, and we spanned the B2C website that probably people know. But then actually our big play was software. So we actually pivoted to software halfway through. And that was sort of a game changer to us. So we actually did restaurant booking software, ticketing software for events, vouchering for restaurants, and actually became a big sort of software player in hospitality. We only ever raised $500,000. So we raised 250 in year two. And then from 6 angels, and then the same angels again the following year, 250. And then we sort of took that cash, ran it very leanly, ran to profitability, and then kept investing the money back into the company, grew it. And by 2017, we had a team of about 65. We had about 10 to 15,000 software customers. DesignMyNight as a front end website had around 8 million views a month. And we sold it in 2017, the back end of 17, and then had a 2-year earn out with our new owners, which ran until Jan 2020. And then now I'm entering my new life as an angel investor, podcaster. I've set up my own sort of startup VC called Horseplay Ventures. And the podcast is called Pitch Deck, which is about startups pitching to angel investors. Sort of going down the other side of the coin now, but really wanting to help the startup community because, I've done it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Could you take us back to DesignMyNight and kind of what inspired you to start it? Did you just want to start a business at that moment in time? I mean, how did that play out?
Yeah, so it's myself and my best mate from uni, so Andrew. We'd always discussed doing a business together, but we weren't constantly thinking of ideas at that time. He was at Accenture, I was at L'Oreal. We were both going down our corporate paths, relatively happy. And then we were actually just partying in New York together. And where most good ideas come from, New York, there was some good websites that we were using to go out there. And our concierge at the hotel was really helpful. So he was saying, like, what type of venue do you want to go to? How much do you want to spend? Asking us loads of detailed questions. When we were out that night, we don't really remember whose idea it was, but we both were formulating the idea of, wouldn't, that type of website in London be super helpful? Because don't forget, back in 2009, it was, there was only a couple of big players in the sort of going out sphere, and they weren't doing digital very well. So I think for us, we always say it wasn't a groundbreaking idea. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We would just thought, okay, what's there already? We could do it a bit better. And more focused on sort of the millennial market, which didn't exist back then, but then they became millennials. And mobile first, digital first, which sounds crazy now, but back in 2010, websites weren't very good at that.
Yeah, I can imagine. How have you seen the tech landscape change? I mean, I'm sure. I mean, maybe I'm making an assumption here, but I'm sure you get pitch decks, probably the pitch decks that are almost clones of DesignMyNight. How have you seen the tech landscape change from 9 years ago and now? Because I'm sure you do get a lot of clones.
Yes, it's a funny one. The hospitality scene is quite sort of backwards. We came at it when we started building the software, at least, sort of, again, very sort of tech first, which again sounds stupid, but it wasn't as obvious back then. And we did sort of reinvent the wheel with the software. We were up against OpenTable and Booker Tables and like huge players, but were sort of slow moving. Weren't doing the job amazingly. So we thought, okay, well, we can do that better. And to be honest, that side of things, still to this day, DesignMyNight is ahead of the game in terms of the booking software side of things. There's still no software on the market that can compete, I think, with the functionality that we have. In terms of the B2C space, yes, I do get a lot of pitch decks that are, it's funny now when I read a pitch deck and I see DesignMyNight in the competitor slide. And this is what DesignMyNight and Time Out do badly, and this is what we want to do well, which I take fine, because to be honest, we didn't actually, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, we didn't do as good a job on DesignMyNight because we were so focused on the software. The software was where the money was. Our users were rolling in on the B2C side. So where it's changed is, I think, personalization. I see a lot of pitch decks that now are like DesignMyNight, but even more mobile, optimized, mobile first, obviously more app-based, very tailored, almost concierge-y. But what I do say to those founders is that sounds great, but actually where we were successful with DesignMyNight was the mass market. So I think you see a lot of pitch decks that are like, we want to send you to the best, the coolest, the unknown places. We want to do a personal service with you one-on-one. But actually, if you reach scale and you've got 8 million people using your site, that gets very difficult. And also, it's the worst venues that want to pay to be on your website because they're not getting the customers. The good ones don't need to pay to get customers. So there's a bit of a dichotomy that happens in the hospitality industry. And, even when we were doing DesignMyNight, we had loads of pretenders to the throne that were like the cool, the best. And actually they died. And DesignMyNight was always, we are everything. So if you want the coolest, we've got it. But actually, if you want a trashy night out, we've got that. If you want to go to the pub with your mates, we've got that. And, it was that mid-tier that was the money makers. The coolest ones aren't the money makers in hospitality.
Now you've exited DesignMyNight. What could somebody do that's kind of entering the space? And I guess the right question would be, what would work right now?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think in hospitality, at least, what would work right now, I think from a B2C space, if you can use technology to be more personable. So, even at DesignMyNight, we had built AI in the background and we were testing lots of sort of recommendation engines that were, top notch. So actually, if you land on a homepage, it should be tailored to you if you're logged in. If you get a newsletter, it should be tailored to you. So I think what's going to move in hospitality is from, here are 500 options that suit your night out to here are 5 that we think are perfect for what you want. And trust us, if you go to one of these 5, you'll have a great dinner or a great night out. So I think using clever algorithms to do very on point, not like Amazon broad recommendations, but very on point. Our recommendation bot in the background was linking up reviews, what people have been favorited. If this venue had a 5-star review, where else had that person gone to and rated it 5 stars? And then you start creating a web of which venues go well together. And actually, we never got there in the end with Design My Night to making it all personal. But I think that's where it will go.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you guys start off as a software business, or did you within the first couple of months, was it more of a concierge service? How did that work out?
So it was just a B2C website at the start. So it was at start, it was just a listings website. So we actually to start, we literally hired an agency which I think is legal, I can say it, to basically to scrape all of the venues off Time Out, View London. So they basically built us this database of every bar and restaurant in London. And we pretty much just uploaded that to our database. So then we just had a database of every venue out there. And then that's how we started. So it's just a listing site. Then we pivoted to bookings, but in as much as we just put a make an inquiry button overnight on every venue page. And then when someone would make an inquiry, it would come into us and we would literally be phoning restaurants and bars, booking people in 24/7. And it was literally me and Andrew doing that. So we did that for like a year, like manual bookings, thousands, 7 days a week, booking people into restaurants and bars. And then we pivoted to software, which was probably about 3 years into the journey. So it went from listing sites to doing manual bookings to actually building the software to power the bookings. So it was a real sort of journey of pivoting along the way.
Yeah, I mean, was there a key insight that kind of triggered the software pivot? I mean, what I think inspired is the wrong word, but were there insights that forced your decision to go to become more of a software business as opposed to a concierge business?
Yeah, I think just scale. So I think, we were very, as I said, we weren't looking to raise VC money. We wanted to raise some cash and then run it very leanly. And I think the great thing about software is it's monthly recurring revenue paid by direct debit. Concierge or bookings is very manual. It's difficult at scale. You charge venues for putting bookings into their venues, but then there's probably a 3-month lag from collecting that cash from putting the booking in, so cash flow is bad. So actually, when we started doing bookings manually, we saw that there was an appetite for bookings in the more bar space, which is where we started. And then it was just, speaking to people. We actually spoke to the original chairman of Top Table, which became Open Table, and he gave us great insight into software. And Open Table or Top Table started the same. So they just did manual bookings, then built a software. So we were sort of following them without knowing. And it was then cash flow. So then we were like, okay, if we want to become solvent without needing more funding, we need regular cash and we need it to be predictable cash. And we knew software would do that. And the market was ripe for disruption. So the two sort of came together at the same time for us.
That's it. That's really interesting. I mean, were there a couple of fundamental reasons as to why Design My Night worked? Because when you guys were around, I used your service a few times, and there were a lot of competitors doing exactly the same thing. They're not around right now. Were there certain insights? I mean, was it SEO? Was it the UX UI design? I mean, could you shine a little bit more light on that?
Yeah, well, so we nailed SEO. So we were big content SEO. It was a content SEO beast, Design My Night. So we had 20, 30, 40,000 pages on the site. very strategically done. So we would strategically look at the keywords that were being searched in hospitality, and we would then build content around those keywords. We started with the low-hanging fruit. So, we started, rather than bars in London, we started with like best basement bars in Soho, best rooftop bars in the city, and built content from the low-hanging fruit. Quickly got to number one because no other sites were focusing on those smaller search terms. And as a result of that, Google then started to recognize us as, a more established site. So then the more content we created around the bigger search terms, the higher our ranking would go. When I left at the 8.5 million views, 65% was still organic Google traffic. And we never did paid ads. So, I still don't understand to this day why people don't focus on that, because for us, your target demographic are searching for exactly what you can give them. So you don't need to do ads. You don't need to do scattergun advertising, above the line. Especially in hospitality, there were millions of searches a month for exactly what we could give them. So that's how we sort of built up. And actually that worked in our favor as well, because we were doing niche stuff. So, people that were searching best basement bars would get a feature about basement bars, and that helped our word of mouth, rather than searching best basement bars and just getting a website with 2,000 venues on. So our tailored content to what the keyword searches were in hospitality worked in our favor. The second thing was customer service. So customer service was absolutely key. We would text our customers when they'd made a booking, and we would keep texting them as to why we hadn't booked them in the early days. So we sort of kept them up to date with the progress of their booking, which again sounds a bit archaic now, but back in the day, if you tried to book into a bar, you might not hear back from the bar for 6 days. It's when the bar manager can be bothered to look at his email. So actually, we sort of changed the game in sort of, we will look after you until you get that booking. So those two things, having really targeted content, incredible customer service, really helped our word of mouth. And you know what? We hardly spent anything on marketing at DesignMyNight. It was all organic SEO and word of mouth.
That's amazing. Did design have an effect on how customers viewed you or your conversion rate?
We probably weren't as good as we could have been on design. So Andrew and I sort of led that product. We never really had a product manager. We worked very closely with our CTO, who's brilliant, and our tech team actually were very front end and back end. So we sort of worked as a team. We did do quick experiments. Again, back in the day, it was, if you change this button to orange, not blue, let's see what impact it has. That was the big thing back then.
Did it ever work?
Not really. Like, very small change. We changed the layout of where the booking button was. And I think the big thing for us, and any tip to anyone else, was imagery. And again, this sounds a bit archaic now, but actually when we shifted the venue pages to large images, and I think video is sort of taking that on now, we saw a huge jump in conversion rate. Because for us, what from the B2C side at least, the big thing for us was, can we stop people finding venues on DesignMyNight and then going to the venues page to book? Because we get no money for that. So actually, it was giving them all the info they needed and a supreme customer service that would make them want to book on our website. And actually huge images, when we shifted to smaller images to a big sort of header image when you land on a venue page, that's sort of probably the biggest jump in our conversion rate.
Yeah, that's
and obviously making sure it works on mobile. Mobile was started at probably 30% of our traffic, and when I left, it's probably 65% of our traffic. And Google now ranks your SEO on your mobile, how good your mobile site is as well. So the obvious things is making sure it does work on mobile, different types of mobile, trying the booking flow out on all the different types of mobile. I think, without a product manager, and because we were running it leanly, you could get lazy. So you just have a quick test, put it live. But actually, really testing the hell out of it is super important. And then encouraging feedback. And when we would get feedback, if it was a bug or something, we would log that, we would fix it, and then go back to that customer and say, FYI, Susan, thank you so much for that feedback. We've actually changed it or fixed it. Really appreciate. Here's a 10 quid bar tab next time you book on DesignMyNight, and actually sort of bring the customer in on the journey with us. And that all played into the sort of fun experience for the customer of DesignMyNight.
Yeah, I mean, were there insights about your customers that you were just surprised to learn about?
In terms of
what they preferred, in terms of how they preferred to interact with your product specifically, and then also what they were looking for. Because normally you build your product based upon how your customer is going to navigate your website. I mean, were there things that you were just surprised to learn about your customer in general as well?
I think we were surprised at how happy they were to do the research. So people would add a lot of venues to sort of their favorites list, and our dwell time on the site was really high. And the average page views per visit were really high. So that told us that people, contrary to what I just said about giving people 5 options now, because actually I think times have changed. Back then, I think people were really happy to, if they were getting the right information from a website, to actually really dig in and do research, almost like a holiday. Where times have changed now, where you want everything quickly now, booked, done, just tell me where I need to go, I'll go. I think, 5, 6, 7 years ago, actually sitting down and doing the research, people really enjoyed doing. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for us. And what else? I think, as I said, the mass market is where the money is. So don't try and be cool. Don't try and be, appealing to the cool sector of a city. I think that sells yourself well. But actually, those type of customers aren't the ones that are going to make you money. It's actually, in hospitality at least, it's your Hindus, it's your tourists, it's your, the younger generation. It's not the connoisseurs looking for the latest, hottest, coolest cocktail bar. They aren't the ones that are going to make you money. That just enables you to sell your product better to the outside world. But actually, we were unashamedly mass, and that worked really well for us.
In terms of your exit now, was it a concerted effort to actually work towards an exit, or did a software company just randomly approach you guys and come up with a great figure you were happy about? Could you actually talk through that process? Because I mean, you don't get many insights about this.
Yeah, so we did it very calculated. So I often say on my LinkedIn or other podcasts is we strategically planned to exit. So when we took on the second round of funding, our angel investors and us sort of agreed a 5-year exit plan. So that would have been 7 years in the business for us. DesignMyNight for us was never this sort of, what can you say, like passion project. We weren't changing the world. We wanted to set up our own business. We came across that idea. We loved every minute of it. But it was never this thing we wanted to do for the rest of our lives. So we were happy with that 5-year plan. And actually what we did is, when we pivoted to software, we then knew that if a software company was going to buy us, it would probably be anywhere between, say, 10 and 18 times EBITDA, so profit, let's say. So let's just say these are dummy numbers, but let's say we were making £1 million. We knew that because it was software, someone would buy us for anything between 10 and 18 million. So actually what Andrew and I did was like, okay, well, let's agree what we're happy to sell DesignMyNight for. We both luckily were in a very similar ballpark on that. And then actually we just forecasted up over the next 5 years how we can get to that X millions of profit. And then we knew if we were making X million of profit by 5 years, someone would want to buy us, even if it wasn't a strategic buyer. A private equity house would want to buy a company making 2, 3, 4 million pound profit. So actually we plotted very carefully year on year up to that EBITDA, that profit number. And the year before we sold, we forecasted that we were going to hit the number that we wanted in a year. So we actually engaged a broker. So we went to meet lots of different brokers who basically his job is to sell your company. And that was a year process. So from picking a broker, we then probably spend about 5 to 6 months with them creating, it's called your IM, which is basically your sales deck, which is like 90 slides long. So you're locked in rooms with the broker. They're understanding your business model. They're modeling it up for you. So they really become sort of integral into the company over those sort of 5, 6 months. Then you both draw up a list of who you think will buy the company. So we had the obvious ones. So, your booking.coms, your TripAdvisors, etc. They have ones that we'd never heard of. And they were focused on Asia as well. But then they actually said to us, which I always remember, they said, okay, no one on this list is going to be the one that buys you. Just trust us. It will be someone that you've probably never heard of is going to come out of the woodwork and buy you. So they said, let's just leave that there. And then they go out. So they go out to those companies on their list, our list, sort of gauge interest. They don't actually say it's DesignMyNight up for sale because it's quite sensitive. Because if you're going to your competitor, let's say they were going to OpenTable saying DesignMyNight's up for sale, this is why their software is amazing. This is their projections over the next 5 years. So that's like gold to OpenTable, who, we were stealing a lot of their customers in the UK. So we didn't want to sort of, if we weren't going to sell, we didn't want to, them to see all of our plans. So actually they go out and they say, look, a software company in the UK is looking to sell. This is the top line stuff. Are you interested? If it's yes, they sign a non-disclosure and you send them the full deck. Then it goes from full deck to a conference call with the heads of M&A. And then it would normally go to a face-to-face meeting if they were even more interested. And then you'd go into negotiations, then you'd go to sale. So that process took about 6 months. And we had we had 3 companies interested to buy us at the end. So we were fortunate that, there was a bit of competitive edge to the bidding process. And then we eventually sold to the one that was not only a very good number, but one that we thought would look after the company the best, look after the staff, not, get rid of all of our team. So yes, we wanted to find a good number for us, but we also wanted to look after the team that, we loved and had helped us build the company. So yeah, that's how then we sold to they're called Access Group, they're a UK software company. That their head office was like down the road from us as well. So it wasn't a romantic, booking.com came to us and then TripAdvisor came to us and they were fighting over millions. It was all very planned. Unfortunately, we had the 3 companies that were interested in the end. And got us to a very good number for us.
Now, was it a cash only transaction, or did you have to earn out your? Did you have to earn it out?
Yeah, so they gave us a proportion up front in cash, and then we had 2 years of targets to hit, which were revenue targets, to then unlock the rest of the cash, basically. So that was part of the negotiation, like how much was tied up in the earnout. And the earnout is our investors said to us, it's going to be tough. and we'd met these guys and they were lovely and they were, selling us their dream, obviously, because they wanted to buy us. And we were like, oh no, it's going to be great. But they were like, look, it's going to be tough. You will not own that company for those 2 years. And you're going to have targets. So that earnout period was quite important. And they range from 1 to 5 years normally in an exit. So 2 years, although a long time, for us was doable. But yeah, that was part of the negotiation was, how long was the earnout and how much money was tied up into the earnout.
I'm going to ask some questions that you may not want to answer, and feel free to say shut up. But throughout the earnout, now when you're sitting in the acquirer's office now, how does the relationship work between you guys and the party that have just bought your company? Are there things that you need to have in place that enable you to efficiently earn out? Like, for example, it would have been great. If you were heavily reliant on PPC ads, right, to generate your revenue, and they cut your marketing budget in half, that would make it extremely difficult for you to earn out what you initially negotiated. Did you have to put things in place that protected you throughout your earnout process?
Yeah, so that was, that's where our lawyers got to work, nicely paid lawyers. So as part of the sales deal was the contract then between us and our acquirer. So we had clauses in our contract that was, things like you can't make a material change to how we run the business. You can't make a material change to our revenue model. You can't make a material change to our team. So basically, we protected ourselves and pretty much said, you've got to leave us to it for 2 years. And actually, that really helped us because there were times when, head office would say to us, oh, I think you guys should do this or that. And we were like, no, disagree. And you can't make us because it's part of our earnout. So we always had that bargaining chip, which was, feel free to change that. But if you change that, you break the contract and you need to pay us out now for the whole earnout. So, yeah. And you know what? The flip of that sounds friction, like it adds friction. But actually, the company acquiring you if we hit our targets, they've got a super healthy company when we leave. So actually, to their credit, they also know that we know what we're doing, and they didn't know what they were doing in that space yet. So actually, they were just like, look, we've got 2 guys that are super passionate, have built it. Just let them crack on with it, basically. And luckily, we did hit our targets, and they had a super healthy company, which was probably worth a lot more than what they paid after 2 years. So in the end, it worked out very well for both parties. But yes, it's fundamental that you have those protections in place when you're going into a deal, because you will get screwed over. However nice companies seem, they're still a huge corporate that have to answer to their shareholders or board, that will have their egos, their ideas, and you're just the startup in their minds. So you really need to make sure you've got those protections in place.
Yeah, passion is a big thing for a startup, and I'm sure you had plenty of it. But did it wean after you sold the company?
Yeah, it's tough, and that is part of it. It's really tough to suddenly you're then chasing a definite door that you're going to leave, which is very different to building up the company. We knew that on the Jan the 1st, 2020, we would be out. It doesn't change your passion as such, because you then become passionate for that target. We did not want to leave any money on the table, but it changes your dynamic. You're then chasing revenue rather than chasing strategy, maybe. So you might not be making the best long-term strategic decisions for your company. You're chasing revenue because that's what you're going to be targeted on. So it was very difficult to get excited about sort of like long-term projects. And Andrew and I, who would love our team coming to us with inventive ideas, we were very much, okay, how long is that going to take you to build X developer? Okay, 2 months. So we would be like, well, how much revenue is that going to drive us? If it's not going to drive us revenue this year, we're not interested. So it became a bit more functional rather than aspirational. And obviously, as a founder, you like to be sort of aspirational. So I think that was the dynamic shift. That your passion came from hitting the target, which again is a different type of passion.
Yeah. I mean, and so like I want to circle back to your current venture right now. Can you talk about what you're up to right now? Because you're out of DesignMyNight.
So we've jumped straight back into others. So I think Andrew and I love startups. We loved the startup hustle in the early days. We love coming up with ideas. We love working with founders. That's the exciting part. As a founder, when you set up a company, you don't think, oh, what I'm looking forward to is managing 60 people and managing HR and, the daily grind and customers whinging in your ear every day. As a startup founder, you're an ideas person. And we loved those early years of DesignMyNight and we loved the startup game. So what we did is we set up an angel investment arm. And we formalized that over the last few months. So that's called Horseplay Ventures. So that's horseplay.ventures. The name, we wanted to have a bit of fun. We wanted to sort of, startups is fun. I think everyone takes the world a bit seriously as well. And people get in their head too much. And actually, it's fun. Like, it could be life-changing. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be dark days. But at the core of it, starting your own business should be fun. So we want to sort of get that across. So at Horseplay, we have an angel investment arm where we do our angel investing, and we're in 25 companies at the moment, which you can look on our Horseplay website. We also have an accelerator and an incubator, which we're just sort of formulating the plans for that at the moment. So nothing's come out of that yet. But then also what we've got on the website is lots of free tools for startups and founders. So they can just go on, and we've got example pitch decks, we've got example budgets, P&Ls, models. We wanted to create a little hub where founders can go and just get some free tips, whether they interact with us or not. They don't have to give us their data or anything. So that's sort of one arm of it, which is Horseplay Ventures. I've then started my own podcast, which is called Pitch Deck. Which is going really well, which I'm really excited about. I just wanted to start a podcast, so just did that during lockdown, bought the microphone and stuff like that. Quite easy to do. I taught myself some editing. Takes ages, so sort of every 40-minute episode takes me about 6 hours in editing, recording, publishing. But we're like 5 episodes in, it shot up the charts early doors. So, we got into like the top 10 global business podcasts, top 5 new global podcasts. The feedback's been great. And the premise of the show is basically a startup founder who wants investment comes on, pitches for 5 to 10 minutes to myself and a guest angel. And then we sort of lift the lid on a sort of angel investor meeting. So we will then ask that founder the questions that we would ask them. And critique the pitch and the deck as we would critique them. So it's a sort of Dragon's Den, but not for the cameras. So we're not necessarily giving the cash. It's more about opening up the lid on how different founders pitch, which is interesting, but also how angels then look at a pitch and critique and the questions we ask. So we critique the founder, and then the founder leaves, and myself and the angel sort of discuss the pitch and the business for 5-10 minutes on what we like, what we don't like, what we'd be worried about. So we really wanted just to get under the bonnet of pitching to angels, and hopefully when people listen, they'll take lots of tips on how angels look at pitches, what we like, what we don't like. So that's been great. So I've recorded, I think, 10 episodes for the first series. We're 5 in at the moment. So search for that, Pitch Deck. And that's sort of where we're putting our focus at the moment.
How should founders really impress on their pitch? I mean, you've probably heard a lot. I mean, are there any obvious ways to impress an angel investor when pitching?
Yeah, so for us, it's we're very founder focused. So really getting the passion that the founder has. But also what's super important is the founder knowing their market, not just their product, their market, because you're pretty sure they're going to have to pivot along the way or something might go wrong. And actually, if you understand your market 100%, you'll be able to make that pivot. If you only understand the parameters of your product and that starts to go wrong, you might struggle. So we really look for people that understand the landscape they're operating in. That annoys me because I'm like, okay, let's just be honest about the competitors and why are you better than those competitors? And why them? So why are they the right founders to bring this to market? So yeah, we're very founder focused across those pillars. And we like to see realism, which is what we did at DesignMyNight. So I like to see revenue, like how are you going to get revenue? I don't want to see a deck where you need 1 million users before you're generating revenue. How are you going to get to profit? Angels think very differently from VCs. Essentially an angel, if you're investing at £1 million valuation and they sell for 50 million, then you've got 50x your return. Whereas what VCs are looking for is, can this be a rocket ship that pays back our whole fund, basically? So they want 500 million pound exits. But actually, an angel looks at it very differently. So actually, Andrew and I are very much on the idea of can we help them grow this to a 30, 40, 50 million pound business without having to take massive VC funding? If they then take VC funding and it becomes huge, great. But let's focus on this side of the market. So yeah, we're very much sort of realistic founders, and we like to meet other realistic founders that have a clear vision, rather than I'm Elon Musk, I'm going to change the world.
Yeah. Have you come across a few angel investments that have eventually turned out massive? I mean, I looked at your LinkedIn profile. You've invested in a few Silicon Valley startups.
Yeah, so I've got a few links back to San Fran. So yeah, luckily I get access to some San Fran Valley deals, which is great. I mean, they're not great in terms of their valuations are sky high, but that's the game over in San Fran. That hasn't changed. So yeah, well, we're only probably like a year into our angel investing, even though we've done 25. So none have rocket shipped. Some are doing super well, and some lockdown and Corona was actually really good. Some Corona was really bad. They're all still going, which is a great start. Let's get to that start first. So yeah, none that have like rocket ship yet, but there are some that are already raising their next round, and it's probably a 5, 6, 7 times more than we got in at. So hopefully, if they carry on that trajectory, we'll be in a good space.
Final 2 questions. First one is an obvious one you probably hear on every single podcast, but is there a book that's massively impacted you across your entrepreneurial journey?
It's a tricky one for me. I've read all the books. I think for me, none sort of impacted me on how I grew the business. The Lean Startup was obviously very influential, and building your MVP and all of that. So that is a very good book for obvious reasons, and we did build a Lean Startup. I more read business books for sort of inspiration, in as much not rather practical advice. So my favorite book is Shoe Dog, Phil Knight. So that's the story of Nike. And I learned it's pronounced Nike, not Nike, from that book. What a wonderful story. I think you forget with all these huge brands, Apple, Nike, etc., that they were startups once upon a time. Especially the more corporate ones like Nike. Like everyone knows Steve Jobs and Apple, and it started in his garage, and Google. But you also forget all these other huge monster, the Bransons, the Sugars, the less sort of fashionable ones. But actually, they started also out the back of their car. Nike was an incredible journey, which made me love Nike even more, even though we look like we're both adverts for Under Armour this
Yeah,
morning.
wearing the
I
exact
like
same t-shirt.
I like Under Armour too, but it gave me a huge new respect for Nike. So
Yeah.
if anyone just wants to read a really good, interesting, exciting book, Shoe Dog was the one for me.
And a failure that in hindsight has set you up for success, or in the trajectory you're in, have there been any humbling moments where you've had to kind of check yourself, or were there any moments or experiences that kind of shifted your perspective on certain things in business?
So I think firstly we were always super humble. So I think, and I hope any of our team would contest to that. You know, we never saw ourselves as, you know, the big uns in the office. You know, we were just part of the team.
Yeah.
We never really imposed. You know, you have to take strategic lead as the founder, but we always listened to input. We always knew we weren't the experts in everything. So when we grew DesignMyNight as founders, we were always very on the ground, very humble, grafting, you know, working our ass off alongside our team. I think for us, the one of big learning early on was we put most of our own cash into the business at the start, before we got funding. And back in 2010, Groupon was flying. So we thought, oh, let's build a Groupon for going out. So it was called DesignMyNight Deals, which was basically,
Oh, wow.
Here's this bar in Soho. If 30 of you buy this deal, you can get the cocktail for £5 instead of £10, which was, it was quite a good idea. But we actually poured probably 50% of our cash into building that platform on top of DesignMyNight. And it just didn't work because we didn't have the traction then. So, you know, not enough people, you know, Groupon worked because it had millions on their email list. And we just sort of ran into that blind. So what that really taught us was focus, and we became laser focused after that. Didn't sort of chase our tail, you know, oh, look, there's something exciting, let's do that. Or here's a new trend, let's chase that. So closing that down very quickly and losing half of the cash we had, really made us laser focused. And I think that was a huge part of our success, was just focusing on what we were good at, what we were selling, and ignoring all the noise around us.
Wow, this has been an amazing conversation. I've learned so much. Where can the audience find you?
So I'm mainly on LinkedIn. So Nick Telson on LinkedIn. Add me there. I'm constantly posting helpful stuff, I hope, for startups and founders. Podcast is called Pitch Deck. We've got a Twitter handle just for the podcast, Pitch Deck Pod. It's not my own personal one. And yeah, that's normally that's where I hang out. I don't have my own personal Twitter, so I invest my time into LinkedIn rather than Twitter.
Oh, wow. Okay, fair enough. How come? Because I mean, do you know what Twitter's like? Probably one of the most favorite tools for Silicon Valley founders, investors. I mean, that's all they're on. You very rarely see Silicon Valley people on LinkedIn, but you see a lot of LinkedIn. You see a lot of UK startups and investors on LinkedIn. So
yeah, I think LinkedIn is more UK, but I also enjoy sort of building and learning better, closer relationships, which I think LinkedIn's good for. My co-founder is on Twitter, so he's sort of keeping his ear to the ground with investors that on the Silicon Valley side. But I've really enjoyed sort of building the community that's LinkedIn, and I don't want too many social media. I don't have my own Instagram. I don't use my own Facebook. So I want to cut all of that noise out of my life. So LinkedIn for me is I look at Twitter for news, and I'll look at VC stuff on Twitter, but more as a stalker rather than an engager. And I sort of pour my time and effort into LinkedIn, and I let Andrew focus on Twitter.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. This has been an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for being on our show.
Pleasure.
Thank
you for asking me.
Yep. Take care.
See you guys.
Yeah. Bye.